I still remember the day Daniel called and told me he was bringing someone home. His voice had that kind of nervous excitement I hadn't heard since he was a boy. When he'd come run in to show me some wild thing he'd built out of old wood and glue. Only this time, it wasn't a birdhouse or a school project. It was Sophie. He said, "Mama, I really think you'll like her." And I wanted to. Lord knows I did. After all, Daniel was my heart, my only child, the one Calvin and I poured everything into, the prayers, the lessons, the long nights grading papers while he slept beside me on the couch, his little head pressed against my lap. That boy grew up knowing respect, knowing what hard work meant. When he made it through architecture school and landed that firm job in Midtown, I thought, Calvin, we did it. So when he told me he'd found someone, I thought maybe this was our next season. New beginnings, like he said. The first time I met Sophie was on a Sunday. I'd cooked all morning. Collard greens, baked macaroni, a little cornbread. I wanted her to taste something that came from my hands, because food says a lot about love. It says, "You're welcome here." She came in looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Cream suit, gold jewelry, perfume so strong I could smell it before she even hugged me. She had this way of looking around the room, not nosy exactly, but like she was cataloging things. Her eyes lingered on the framed photos, the old china cabinet, the worn-out Bible by the lamp. "You have such a vintage home," she said, smiling that polite smile people wear when they don't quite mean what they say. I smiled back. "Well, baby, it's been standing since '83. My husband built most of it himself. Every nail in these walls meant something." She nodded like she understood, but I could see it in her eyes. She didn't, not really. To her, this was just an old house. To me, it was my husband's hands, his sweat, his love turned into brick and wood. That first dinner went smoothly enough. Daniel did most of the talking, nervous as ever. Sophie smiled at the right times, asked polite questions about my teaching days. But something about the way she touched his arm every time she spoke, like a reminder, made me uneasy. It wasn't affection, it was ownership. I brushed it off, told myself I was being protective. After all, a mother's heart can be too sharp sometimes. After they left, I sat in the quiet living room, the smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. I looked around at the family pictures and at Calvin's old armchair and whispered, "Lord, help me see this girl for who she really is, good or bad." A few weeks later, Daniel called again. "Mama," he said, "Sophie and I are thinking of staying with you for a while, just until our condo renovations finish." Now, that wasn't what I'd expected to hear. My home had always been open, but it had been quiet since Calvin passed. I'd grown used to the rhythm, gospel music in the morning, the soft ticking of the kitchen clock, the occasional hum of cicadas through the open window. Having two young people under the same roof again would change all that. Still, I said, "Of course, baby. You two come on home. You know there's room here." When I hung up, I sat for a long time staring at the deed papers in my desk drawer. They were old, the ink faded but firm. Calvin and Margaret Johnson, joint owners. After he passed, I changed them into my name alone. But something, maybe intuition, maybe wisdom, told me to take them out that night. I read every line, then called my attorney friend, Denise. I said, "Denise, I want to make a small adjustment just to be safe." The day Daniel and Sophie moved in, the air felt different. Sophie brought boxes, designer suitcases, art pieces that looked more at home in a penthouse than my living room. She didn't mean to insult, but every comment, "Oh, we'll need to update this. This lighting is so dim. Do you mind if I move this?" landed like a slow cut. I watched her try to fit her world into mine, and I smiled, even when it hurt, because that's what mothers do. We make space. But at night, when the house went still, I'd hear whispers from their room. Sophie's sharp tone, Daniel's tired responses. "I don't want to live here forever, Danny. It's too small, too old-fashioned. Don't you want a place that's ours?" And he'd mumble something soft, trying to soothe her, like he used to soothe me when he scraped his knee as a boy. What he didn't realize was that the person who needed soothing now wasn't me, it was his conscience.
One evening, Sophie came home early while I was on the porch watering my garden. She watched me for a moment, then said, "You know, Margaret, you really take pride in this place." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "This home raised a family. You don't just live in a place like this, you grow in it." She smiled faintly. "Well, maybe we'll grow into something new soon." Something in her voice made the water stop mid-pour. I looked at her, really looked, and saw that smile again, the kind that hides plans behind teeth. That night, I called Denise again. "Go ahead and file the new papers," I said quietly. "Put it in the trust, my name only." And that's how it started, not with shouting or drama, but with whispers and signatures. I didn't know what Sophie was planning, but I knew something was coming, because when you've lived long enough, you learn to feel the shift in the air before a storm breaks. And in my house, a storm was brewing, one that would test not just my patience, but everything my husband and I had built together.
They say a house doesn't break down all at once. It starts with a hairline crack, barely visible at first. Then moisture seeps in, the foundation shifts, and before long, the whole thing begins to tilt. That's how it was with Sophie and me. At first, the cracks were small. It started with little things. The curtains, for example. I'd had those sheer white curtains for almost 20 years. Calvin liked the way the morning sun came through them, soft and golden. Every morning, I'd sit by that window with my coffee and think of him. But one morning, Sophie came in while I was sipping from my mug and said, "Margaret, I was thinking, maybe we could replace these, something more modern, to brighten things up." I looked at her, puzzled. "Baby, the sun already does that." She smiled like I told a joke. "Yes, but something fresher would really elevate the space." I said nothing, but later that day, I noticed a box by the hallway. New curtains, beige linen, still wrapped in plastic. She didn't even wait for my answer. Daniel, bless his heart, tried to keep the peace. "She just wants to help, Mama," he told me one night after dinner. "You know how she is. She likes things to look a certain way." I nodded. "I understand, but this house has looked a certain way since before she was born." He sighed. "Please don't make this a thing." I wanted to tell him that it already was a thing. You don't move into a person's home and start rearranging their memories. But I bit my tongue, because sometimes silence teaches louder than words ever can. A few weeks later, I noticed other changes. The photo of Calvin and me that used to sit on the mantel was now tucked away in a drawer. The old quilt I'd made from Daniel's baby clothes had been stored to avoid dust. Even the Bible that used to rest by the lamp had disappeared one morning, replaced by a glossy interior design magazine. When I asked about it, Sophie said, "Oh, I was just tidying up. I didn't think you'd mind." Her tone was all sugar, but her eyes said something else. That quiet challenge, the kind people use when they're testing how far they can go. I minded. One evening, I came home from church to find her sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, papers spread everywhere. Daniel wasn't home yet. She looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled. "Margaret, I didn't expect you back so soon. What are you working on, sweetheart?" "Oh, just some budgeting for the condo. We're almost done with renovations. I can't wait to move in." She said it like a promise to herself, not a statement. Daniel told me it's coming along nicely, I said, putting my purse down. Yes, she replied, then paused. It'll be good to finally have a place that's ours, you know? I nodded, though something about her tone itched under my skin. Then, casually, she asked, "Do you ever think about what you'll do when you can't manage the house anymore?" I looked up from the sink. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "I just mean, it's a lot for one person. Big property, older structure. Daniel worries sometimes. I do too. Maybe one day it'll make sense to downsize. Something simpler. Maybe closer to us." There it was. The first real crack. I dried my hands and said, "This house has seen me through more storms than you can imagine. If it gets too much for me, I'll be the first to know." She smiled again, but her eyes flickered with something sharp, a kind of quiet calculation.
Daniel came home soon after, and Sophie instantly shifted gears, wrapping her arms around him, all laughter and warmth. But I noticed how her tone changed when she spoke to me, softer when he was around, cooler when he wasn't. It wasn't what she said that hurt. It was how she said it. Like when she'd comment, "Margaret, you always cook such traditional meals, so comforting." Or, "You really don't use a dishwasher, do you? That's so old school." Each word was dressed like a compliment, but it carried a sting beneath it, a subtle reminder that in her eyes I was outdated, something to be replaced. One Sunday morning, I overheard them in the living room. They thought I was out back. "Danny," she said, "I just think your mother could use a change. That house, it's too much. We could help her sell it, maybe move her into a smaller place, something manageable." Daniel sighed. "We're not selling my mother's house, Sophie. This is my family home." "But it's not practical," she pressed. "We can't build our life around her. You know she won't live here forever." That was enough for me to step inside. I cleared my throat gently. "You're right, dear," I said. "I won't live here forever, but until then, I plan to live right here." Sophie froze, then turned with that polished smile of hers. "Oh, Margaret, we were just—" "I know what you were just," I said, "and I appreciate your concern, but this home has an owner, and that owner isn't planning on going anywhere." Daniel looked between us, guilt flickering across his face. "Mama," I held up a hand. "It's fine, baby. I've heard enough." Then I walked out to the porch, sat down in Calden's old rocking chair, and watched the sun dip below the trees. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anger I hadn't felt in years. That night I didn't sleep. I sat up reading old letters Calvin had written me when we were first married, his handwriting steady, his words simple but true. "If you take care of what we build, it'll take care of you." So I made a decision. The next morning, I drove into town, went straight to the courthouse, and checked the property file. My name was still there, firm and clear. I made a few more adjustments to the trust with Denise that afternoon, tightening the clauses, locking the house down in legal language so thick not even the devil himself could pry it loose. I wasn't angry at Sophie, not yet. I was prepared. When I got home, she was in the kitchen again, humming while scrolling on her phone. She looked up, smiling sweetly. "You're out early. Errands?" "Yes," I said. "Just some business to take care of." "Oh?" "Nothing exciting," I said, my tone easy. "Just making sure everything in this house stays exactly as it should." Her smile faltered just slightly, but it was enough for me. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere shifted. Sophie tried to act friendly, but her patience wore thin. The cracks grew wider. She started making little mistakes, forgetting to tell me about deliveries, misplacing my mail, giving away some of my old things under the guise of decluttering. Daniel noticed tension but didn't know what to do. "Can't you two just get along?" he asked one night, exasperated. I smiled. We are getting along, baby, just in different directions. He didn't understand what I meant, but Sophie did. And that's when I saw it, that glint in her eye, the kind that told me this wasn't just about the house. This was about control. She didn't want to live here. She wanted to own it. That realization changed everything. I stopped confronting her. Instead, I watched, quietly, patiently, the way a gardener watches a weed grow, not to fear it, but to know exactly where to pull. Because this wasn't just my home. It was my history, my promise, and I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my son's wife, take it from me.
There's a strange thing about silence. People mistake it for weakness. They think quiet means you're blind, that you don't see what's happening right in front of you. But silence is a tool if you know how to use it. And I've had a lifetime to learn. The morning it truly shifted started like any other. The house was still, except for the creak of the old floorboards and the sound of the coffee machine sputtering awake. I had just poured myself a cup when Sophie floated in, wearing her silk robe, phone in hand. "Morning, Margaret," she said, barely glancing at me. Her voice was smooth but distracted, that kind of tone people use when they've already decided they're more important than the conversation. "Morning," I said back. "Daniel's already left for work." "Oh, I know." She scrolled through her messages. "He mentioned a meeting." I took a slow sip. "He always mentions his meetings." She looked up briefly, then smiled, that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You sound lonely." I didn't flinch. "No, dear, I sound aware." That day, I noticed something I hadn't before. The way she handled things around the house, as if she already owned it. Little habits that spoke louder than her words. She'd leave mail opened on the counter, scribble notes about repairs and future improvements. I even caught her walking a real estate agent through the backyard one afternoon. I'd just come home from the grocery store when I saw them, a woman in heels and a tight blazer gesturing toward the house. "Can I help you?" I asked, setting my bags down. Sophie turned, startled for a fraction of a second before slipping on her smile. "Oh, Margaret, this is Angela. She's just giving me some advice about property value." Angela's smile faltered under my gaze. "Lovely home you've got," she said carefully. "I know, and I intend to keep it that way." Sophie's jaw tightened. "It's just a consultation for a home that isn't yours." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm just trying to help." "I'm sure you are." Angela excused herself quickly after that, muttering something about appointments. Sophie followed her out, whispering something sharp before coming back in. "Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" she hissed once the door shut. I looked at her, really looked at her, because I learned a long time ago that when someone's too eager to help, it's not you they're helping. Her nostrils flared. "You think I'm after your house?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know." That evening, Daniel came home, and the house filled with the tension we'd both been pretending didn't exist. Sophie, all honey and light, told him about the misunderstanding. She overreacted. I was just looking into some estimates. I thought it would be good for when we decide what to do next. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean by what to do next?" Sophie hesitated. "I mean, long term. You said your mom's been having back pain lately. I just thought that I'd sell the house," I interrupted. Daniel looked at me, confused. "Mama, that's not what she meant." "Oh, I think that's exactly what she meant," I said, my tone calm but firm. "She's planning for a future I haven't agreed to." Sophie crossed her arms. "You can't live here forever."
Watch me. The silence that followed was cold and heavy. Daniel rubbed his temples. Please, both of you, let's not do this. I got up from the table. Then maybe you should listen a little closer next time, son, because one of us is lying and it isn't me.
That night, I sat in my room and opened the old safe beneath the floorboards. Inside were the documents Calvin and I had drafted years ago, the house deed, the trust papers, the notarized letters that tied everything together. When Calvin passed, I'd made sure every signature was clean, every page sealed, every clause airtight. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters of my name. Margaret L. Johnson, owner, trustee, beneficiary. I smiled. You taught me well, Cal, I whispered. Then I took out a fresh folder and added a few more things. New copies, amendments, legal notes from Denise. Sophie wouldn't see them, but she didn't need to. These papers weren't for her eyes. They were my quiet armor. The next few days, Sophie was careful. Too careful. She greeted me in the mornings, offered tea, even asked about my church friends. All sweetness and small talk, but I could tell she was watching me just as closely as I was watching her. That's the thing about people who think they're clever. They can't stand not knowing what you're up to. So, I gave her something to think about. One afternoon, while she was pretending to work in the living room, I called Denise on speakerphone. "Denise," I said, my voice just loud enough. "Yes, the documents are finalized. Everything's under my name exclusively. No changes can be made without my authorization." Sophie froze mid-keystroke. "Of course," I continued, "that includes the house and all future inheritance clauses. Yes, everything is legally binding now. Thank you, dear." Then I hung up, poured myself a cup of tea, and walked past her like nothing had happened. She didn't say a word, but her expression said plenty. That night, I heard her on the phone. "I don't understand, Daniel," she whispered harshly from the hallway. "She's doing this on purpose. She wants to cut us out." "She's not cutting anyone out," Daniel said, his voice tired. "She just wants to make sure things are in order." "In order," she snapped. "She's rewriting everything behind our backs." I heard a pause. Then Daniel's sigh. "Maybe we should just leave it alone for now." Sophie didn't respond, but I could imagine the look on her face. That's when I knew she'd cross the line soon. And she did. A week later, I came home from choir practice and found my things, boxes stacked by the door, my quilts, old books, even my grandmother's china wrapped in newspaper. "What's this?" I asked, setting down my purse. Sophie walked out of the kitchen, calm as a statue. "I thought we could start moving some of your things out early." "Out?" "Well, Daniel and I have been talking. You deserve somewhere peaceful, somewhere you can relax, maybe closer to a care facility or—" "Stop right there," I said, my voice low. She blinked. "Margaret, I'm not going anywhere." "You can't stay here forever," she said, her tone rising. "This isn't just your home anymore." "Yes, it is." She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Do you even realize how selfish you sound? Daniel and I have our future to think about. You're just holding on to the past." I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "You're right. I am holding on to the past because it's the reason you even have a future." Her face tightened. I continued, "This house was built on love, not greed, and I'll be damned if I let you tear it down with your ambition." We stared at each other, two women from different worlds, but the same steel running through our veins. Then she whispered, "You'll regret this." I smiled.
calm and deliberate. No, sweetheart, you will.
That night, I sent one last email to Denise. Initiate the contingency clause. Lock the documents. And as I sat by the window watching the moonlight spill across the old wooden floor, I realized the turning point wasn't just for Sophie. It was for me, too. Because sometimes you don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with the quiet strength of stone, the kind that doesn't burn, doesn't bend, and never, ever moves.
Some wars don't start with noise. They start with paperwork, a signature here, a quiet email there. And before you know it, someone's building an empire out of your silence. The week after the incident, Sophie changed tactics. Gone were the sarcastic smiles, the pointed remarks, the quiet power plays. She was all warmth now. Every word dipped in honey, every glance staged for Daniel's benefit. "Morning, Margaret," she'd call from the kitchen, her voice sing-song and bright. She started cooking breakfast, not because she cared, but because gestures make good theater. Daniel ate it up. "She's trying, Mama," he said one evening. "Let's just give her a chance." I smiled. "I always give people enough rope, Daniel." He frowned. "To hang themselves? To show me who they are." One afternoon, I walked into the study and found her at my desk. My desk! Some wars don't start with noise. They start with paperwork. A signature here, a quiet email there, and before you know it, someone's building an empire out of your silence. The week after the incident, Sophie changed tactics. Gone were the sarcastic smiles, the pointed remarks, the quiet power plays. She was all warmth now. Every word dipped in honey, every glance staged for Daniel's benefit. "Morning, Margaret," she'd call from the kitchen, her voice sing-song and bright. She started cooking breakfast, not because she cared, but because gestures make good theater. Daniel ate it up. "She's trying, Mama," he said one evening. "Let's just give her a chance." I smiled. "I always give people enough rope, Daniel." He frowned. "To hang themselves? To show me who they are." One afternoon, I walked into the study and found her at my desk, pretending to dust, but her eyes were fixed on the locked drawer. I didn't say a word. I simply stood in the doorway until she noticed. "Oh, I was just tidying up a bit," she said, setting down the duster too quickly. I stepped closer. "You missed a spot." She blinked. "Where?" I leaned in slightly, pointed to the edge of the drawer, and smiled. "Right under your curiosity." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she turned away. That evening, I checked the drawer. The key was still in my pocket, but the faintest scratch around the lock told me enough. She tried and failed. So I made sure to leave something for her next time, something she wasn't supposed to see. A single folded letter, typed neatly, addressed to my lawyer. I placed it in plain sight, just slightly ajar, like bait left for a fox. The next morning, it was gone. Sophie was clever, I'll give her that. She knew better than to confront me directly. Instead, she started sowing little seeds of doubt in Daniel's mind, subtle, almost invisible. "She's been acting different lately," I overheard her whisper one night. "Secretive, forgetful. I think it's her age." My age. Daniel hesitated. "She's just stressed." "No," Sophie insisted. "She's paranoid. She's hiding things." He sighed, unsure. "Maybe you're reading too much into it." "I'm not," she said quietly. "I'm worried about her." Worried. the same word people use when they want to sound caring while sharpening their knives. The next day, Daniel brought it up over dinner. "Mama, do you ever forget things, like small details?" I looked up from my plate. "Sometimes. Why?" "No reason. Sophie just said that I've been hiding things." His fork froze midair. "She didn't say that." "Not directly, no." He sighed. "Please, Mama, don't make this harder." I smiled softly. "I'm not making it harder, son. I'm making it clear." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. He was caught between two worlds, both demanding loyalty, both whispering truths that sounded like lies. Later that night, Sophie approached me in the hallway. "You know," she said softly, "you could make this easier on yourself. We all want what's best for you." I looked at her. "No, dear, you want what's best for you." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Daniel trusts me. You should too. I trust people who earn it, not people who rehearse it." Her expression flickered, a crack in her perfect composure. "You think you're untouchable." "No," I said calmly, "just well prepared." And I was. While Sophie was busy playing social chess, I'd already moved the queen. I met with Denise twice that week, once in person, once on the phone. We adjusted the trust, shifted the deed, and rerouted the inheritance clause through a private foundation, one Sophie couldn't access, even through Daniel. Everything was legal. Everything was quiet. When the paperwork was done, Denise smiled. "You're setting up quite a defense, Margaret." I sipped my tea. "Not a defense, dear. A mirror, so she can see herself clearly when this all crashes down." But Sophie wasn't giving up either. She started taking pictures of the house, for insurance, she said. She called appraisers, met with bankers, even left subtle brochures about assisted living homes on the coffee table. When Daniel questioned it, she smiled sweetly, just thinking ahead. And when he wasn't looking, she made sure I saw the brochures too. Each one neatly folded, labeled, and left where I'd find them. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. You don't belong here anymore. The air in the house thickened. Every word had weight. Every glance had history. Daniel became quieter, caught between loyalty and exhaustion. Sophie became sharper, more polished, every gesture calculated. And I became invisible again. At least that's what she thought, because sometimes invisibility is the best disguise. A week later, I mailed a small envelope, no return address, no fanfare, to Daniel's office. Inside, copies of every document Sophie had tampered with, altered forms, draft emails, her unauthorized estimates for the house sale, and a printed text she'd sent to the realtor. Once Margaret's moved out, we can move forward with renovations. Keep this between us. Nothing dramatic, just truth, neat, silent, and irrefutable. That evening, I heard the argument. "What did you send to the realtor?" Daniel's voice, raised and trembling. Sophie tried to sound calm. "You're overreacting. It was just—" "Don't lie to me, Sophie." "I wasn't lying. I was trying to help us plan. By kicking my mother out of her home?" There was a pause, then a crash, maybe a glass. "Daniel, please." "Stop talking." Then silence. Long, heavy silence.
When he came to my room later that night, Daniel looked broken.
"She went too far," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yes, but you needed to see it yourself." He rubbed his eyes. "I did." "Then that's enough," I said gently. But I could tell it wasn't. Not for him, not for her, not for me. The damage had been done. The next morning, Sophie didn't come down for breakfast. Her car was gone by noon. She didn't take her clothes, just her pride. And the house was quiet again. But this wasn't peace. It was pause, the kind that comes before something worse. Because if there's one thing I've learned about people like Sophie, it's this. They don't disappear. They regroup. That night, as I sat alone in the study, I looked at the old clock ticking on the mantel. The same clock Calvin had given me on our 10th anniversary. I smiled faintly. "You'd be proud of me, Cal," I whispered. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I just waited. The wind outside rattled the windows softly. I closed my notebook, turned off the lamp, and whispered to the dark. "The war is not over yet."
It had been 6 months since Sophie left. 6 months of silence, of slow mornings, of a house that no longer whispered arguments through the walls. I had learned to breathe again. I tended my garden in the back, the way Calvin and I used to, pruning roses, coaxing life out of things that looked dead. Daniel called often, though not as much as I would have liked. He said work was busy, that he was traveling. I knew what that meant. He was still healing, still untangling himself from the guilt Sophie left behind. That was fine. Some wounds need to be alone before they close. I thought I had found peace, until the day I heard her voice again. It was a Sunday afternoon. The air was heavy with humidity, and I was in the kitchen brewing chamomile tea. Then a knock. Soft, deliberate. 3 times. When I opened the door, there she was. Sophie. She looked different, thinner, sharper, her beauty honed down to something brittle. Her hair was shorter, her posture still perfect, but her eyes had learned humility the hard way. "Hello, Margaret," she said, her tone calm. I didn't move. "You're a brave woman to come back here." "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. "I just need to talk." I studied her face. Her lips trembled just slightly. Fear maybe, or exhaustion. I stepped aside. "Then talk." She hesitated. "May I come in?" I let the silence stretch before answering. "You may." We sat in the living room, the same room where she'd once tried to erase me. Funny how spaces remember things, the tension in their walls, the ghosts of conversations long dead. She looked around, almost wistfully. "You redecorated." "A few small changes. It's easier to breathe when the air's honest." She winced. "I deserved that." "You deserve more than words, Sophie, but I'm too tired for vengeance." She folded her hands. "I didn't come for forgiveness." "I didn't come for forgiveness." "Good," I said softly. "You wouldn't get it yet." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I lost everything," she said finally. "Daniel left. The condo, the accounts, all gone. The company I invested in went under. I've been living with a friend. Friends are useful when family is not." Her jaw tightened. "You think I don't know what I did? I think you know exactly what you did. You just didn't expect the consequences to find you so quickly." She took a deep breath. "You were always one step ahead, even when I thought you were just watching." "I wasn't watching, Sophie. I was learning." She looked down at her hands. "I thought if I could get you out of this house, things would be easier. For whom? For Daniel? For me? For our future? And what future did you build? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't need to.
There's something disarming about seeing your rival broken. You'd think it would feel satisfying, but it doesn't. Watching her struggle to find words, to defend herself against her own reflection, it wasn't victory. It was recognition. I poured her a cup of tea. She looked surprised. You still make tea for people who betrayed you? I smiled faintly. Only if they look thirsty. She accepted it, hands shaking. For a while, we sat in silence. Two women on opposite ends of a war, finally without weapons. Then she said something I didn't expect. I know you changed the deed, she said quietly. I didn't flinch. Do you? Yes. I found out from Daniel after everything fell apart. You made sure the house was untouchable. I did. She met my eyes. When? The day you told me you wanted to remodel the guest room. Her eyebrows furrowed. That early? I nodded. You forget, Sophie. I was married to a man who built his life through storms. Calvin used to say, you board the windows before the hurricane, not during it. She exhaled, almost a laugh. You never gave me a chance. I had many, I said. You mistook kindness for weakness. Her face hardened. You think you're so much better than me. I leaned back. No, Sophie, just older, which means I've made the same mistakes, but I learned from them before they ruined me. She looked away, biting back tears. I loved Daniel. I know. But I didn't know how to be enough for him with you still here. There it was, the truth under all the noise. She hadn't hated me because of who I was. She had hated me because of what I represented, roots. And roots are hard to compete with when all you know are wings. Daniel's moving on, I said gently. He deserves peace. She nodded slowly. He does. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. What's this? She slid it across the table. The title transfer for your house. I wanted you to know I respect it now. It's yours, fully. I won't contest anything. I didn't touch it. That was decided months ago. I know, but I wanted to say it myself. Her tone was steady, sincere. I watched her closely, searching for the performance, but there wasn't one. She looked tired, stripped of armor, and for the first time, human. When she stood to leave, I asked, "What will you do now?" She gave a small, uncertain shrug. Start over, I guess. I applied for a job at a local shelter. They said they could use someone good at organizing things. I smiled faintly. Organizing or controlling? Her lips twitched. Maybe I'll learn the difference this time. We both knew this was the last time we'd see each other. At the door, she paused. You were right about one thing, Margaret. Oh? She said you always give people enough rope to show who they are. And? She gave a sad smile. I finally saw who I was, and I didn't like it. When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long time, the sound of her footsteps fading down the walkway. For the first time in years, I felt still, not victorious, not vindicated, just still. I looked around the house, my house, and it didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like home again. Later that evening, Daniel called. I heard she came by, he said softly. She did. How was it? Necessary? He sighed. She said she's leaving town. I know. There was a pause. Then, I'm sorry, Mama. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Don't be. We all make choices. Some of us just sign them in ink. He chuckled weakly. You sound just like Dad.
That's because I listened, I said gently. After we hung up, I stepped outside. The air smelled of rain and cut grass. The roses were blooming again. Fierce, defiant things, surviving storms that should have killed them. I thought of Sophie, brittle, but blooming too, maybe somewhere far away. And I whispered to the night, more to myself than anyone, peace isn't what happens after the war. It's what you build when you stop fighting. Then I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and let the silence keep me company.
When people talk about closure, they make it sound like a door you get to shut once and for all. But the truth is, closure isn't a door, it's a window. And sometimes the wind blows through it again when you least expect it. That wind came to me 3 weeks after Sophie left. It was a Thursday morning. The mail sat in a neat pile on the table. Bills, flyers, a letter from my church committee. And then one envelope that caught my eye. No return address, but the handwriting, elegant, deliberate. I knew it. Sophie. For a long while, I just stared at it. My first instinct was to tear it apart, unread. But curiosity is a stubborn companion, especially to women like me. I sat down, slid a letter opener through the edge, and unfolded the pages. Dear Margaret, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this before I can move on. You once told me that people reveal who they are not in what they want, but in what they fear losing. I think I finally understand what that means. Her words were clean, simple, not dramatic, not self-pitying. When I met Daniel, I was 28 and desperate to prove myself. He was kind, stable, everything I thought love was supposed to look like. But from the beginning, I knew I wasn't really in his world. He came from warmth, from family, from tradition. I came from noise and survival. My mother worked double shifts at a diner. My father left when I was 9. The only way I ever got anywhere was by pretending I belonged. I paused there, the page trembling slightly between my fingers. Pretending she belonged. That sentence, it ached in a way I didn't expect. So when I met you, I didn't see a woman. I saw everything I was afraid of. Poise, education, control, grace. You terrified me, Margaret. Every word you spoke, every silence you held, it felt like a mirror showing me what I wasn't. And instead of learning from it, I tried to destroy it. I leaned back, letting the words settle. For years, I thought Sophie's cruelty came from greed. But it wasn't greed. It was insecurity with a knife in its hand. She told herself that if she could take my place, if she could make Daniel and everyone else respect me like they did you, she would finally be safe. But it never worked. The more I fought you, the smaller I felt. Every argument with Daniel, every snide remark, every manipulative smile, it wasn't strength. It was me trying not to drown. For a moment, I could see her again at my kitchen table. The same trembling hands, the same guarded eyes. You know, I changed the deed before I ever made my move. And when I found out, I thought it was betrayal. But now I see it was mercy. You knew what I was going to do before I did. And you protected Daniel, the house, and even me from my worst self.
I stopped reading there. The room felt heavy, the kind of heavy that comes with old griefs finally spoken aloud. The rest of the letter was shorter. I've taken the job at the shelter. It's not glamorous, but I'm learning what it feels like to give without expecting something back. They call me Ms. Sophie there. It's humbling. I see women come in every day who've lost everything, and I think, that could have been me. Maybe it still is. If it means anything, I never hated you. I just didn't know how to love anyone without competition. Take care of Daniel. He deserves peace. And thank you for not hating me back. It was signed simply, Sophie Reed.
I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the framed photo of Calvin and me on the mantel. He would have said, "You can't fault a storm for being a storm." He was right. But as I looked out the window, I realized that maybe storms don't destroy. They just show you which parts of your house are built to last. And my house, my life, had been built on patience, not pride. That evening, Daniel stopped by unannounced. He looked tired, older, but softer too. "I got a letter," he said quietly. "From Sophie?" He nodded. "She sent me one too." I poured him tea and waited. "She said she's sorry," he murmured. "Said she never should have tried to make me choose between you two." I smiled gently. That was a battle no one could have won. He chuckled. "You'd be surprised. I tried pretty hard." We both laughed, not loudly, but with the kind of laughter that lets pain go one thread at a time. Then Daniel's voice dropped. "She told me about the deed." I nodded. I thought she might. "You really did change it, huh?" "Yes, the week after your father passed." He leaned back, staring at me. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to embarrass you," I said simply. "You were building a life with her. I didn't want to start it with suspicion." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You always plan ahead." "Someone has to," I replied softly. "Your father used to say, a mother doesn't build walls, she builds roofs." Daniel smiled faintly. "You built both." "Only because the storm was fierce," I said. He reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. "I'm sorry you had to protect me from my own wife." I shook my head. "No, son. I protected you from pain that could have broken you before you learned from it. You needed to see people clearly, even me." He looked puzzled. "You?" I nodded. "I wasn't always like this, Daniel. I learned to protect myself because no one else would. Your father softened me, but before him, I was more like Sophie than you'd imagine." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then said it plainly. "When I was younger, I was desperate to belong. I came from nothing. No money, no name. Your father's world terrified me. The only difference between Sophie and me is that I found someone patient enough to teach me that worth isn't something you fight for. It's something you live with." Daniel's eyes softened.
I wish she had had that. So do I whispered.
Later that night, after Daniel left, I sat on the porch. The crickets sang low, the air was warm and wet with spring. I thought about the letter, about Sophie, about all the noise that had finally gone quiet. The strange thing about forgiveness is that it doesn't start when someone says sorry. It starts when you stop needing to hear it. And I realized I had forgiven her long before she ever wrote that letter, because that's what preparation really means. Not just contracts or deeds or plans, but the emotional groundwork for grace. You don't prepare for a storm by hating the clouds. You prepare by knowing how to rebuild after the rain. When I went inside, I placed the letter inside the old cedar box that held my wedding ring and Kelvin's watch, 3 symbols of things that lasted. Then I whispered a prayer, not for myself, but for her. Let her learn peace, I said quietly. Let her build something that doesn't need to be defended. And for the first time since that first knock on the door, I knew this story, my story, was finally beginning to end the right way. There's a peculiar stillness that comes after long storms, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything from you, it just lets you be. That's what my mornings have felt like lately. The kettle hums softly, the porch boards creak under my slippers, and the world feels steady again. Not untouched, not the same, but steady. It's been 6 months since Sophie's letter. Daniel and I still talk every Sunday. He visits with flowers, sometimes brings that young woman he's been seeing, Claire, an art teacher with kind eyes and an unhurried laugh. He seems lighter around her. I like that. But it wasn't Daniel who made me think of Sophie again. It was the church bulletin. A new shelter had opened on the south side of town, Haven House. They were asking for volunteers to help sort donations. At the bottom of the announcement, in small italic print, was a name. Coordinator, S. Reed. I don't know why, but I felt my breath catch. After all that time, she was still here, still trying. That Sunday, I went. The building was small, pale brick, old but clean. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the back rooms. The air smelled of coffee and detergent. Inside, a few women sorted boxes of clothing. I asked for the coordinator, and a girl with a messy bun pointed toward the kitchen. "She's in there," she said, making lunch for the residents. When I stepped into the kitchen, the sight nearly stopped me. There she was, Sophie, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, and stirring a pot of soup. Her back was turned, but her posture was different, softer, less guarded. I hesitated. Then, quietly, I said, "You've always been good at feeding people." She froze, then turned. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The years hung between us, heavy but not hostile. Finally, she smiled, not wide, but real. "You came." I did. She gestured to a chair. "Would you like some tea?" "Only if you'll sit with me," I said. The tea was simple, cheap, probably donated. But the quiet between us wasn't awkward this time. It was honest. "You look well," I said. "So do you," she replied. "I heard Daniel's doing better." "He is. He's happy." "I'm glad." She paused, eyes lowering. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "Neither did I admitted. But when I saw your name, I thought, maybe it was time.
Sophie nodded slowly. I'm not sure I deserve that. I smiled faintly. Deserve has nothing to do with it.
She exhaled, staring into her cup. This place keeps me grounded, she said. Most of the women who come here remind me of who I used to be. Angry, desperate, afraid. I try to help them find jobs, get clean, start over. But sometimes it feels like trying to plant flowers in concrete. Then you keep planting, I said softly. She looked up at me, eyes wet. Do you really believe people change? I thought for a long moment. No, I said honestly. I believe they grow. And growth isn't the same as change. Growth keeps the roots, but learns where to reach. She nodded slowly. That's beautiful. It's true, I replied. You've grown, Sophie. I can see it. Her lip trembled. I hurt a lot of people, Margaret. Yes, I said simply, but you're helping now. And that's how the scales begin to balance. We sat in silence for a while. In the other room, a little girl laughed. Someone turned on a radio, faint gospel music, tinny but sweet. Finally, Sophie said, Do you ever regret it, how things ended? I took a deep breath. I regret that we both thought love was something you have to win. Her eyes glistened. Me too. Love isn't competition. It's stewardship. You tend to it, you protect it, and when it withers, you don't curse the soil. You learn how to plant again. She nodded slowly. That's something Calvin would have said. I chuckled. It is. I stole it from him. When I stood to leave, she followed me to the door. Margaret, she said quietly, thank you for coming, for not giving up on me completely. I turned to her, meeting her gaze. I didn't come to save you, Sophie. I came to see the proof that grace works. Tears spilled over then, hers, not mine. I placed a hand on her shoulder. You keep building this place, not for forgiveness, for freedom. She nodded, unable to speak. And then, softly, I said, Take care, my dear. Outside, the sunlight was pale and forgiving. Children chased each other across the lot, their laughter sharp and sweet like bells. As I walked back to my car, I realized something. The world doesn't erase the pain we've caused. It just teaches us how to hold it more gently. Forgiveness, grace, they're not things you give. They're things you learn to live with. And as I started the car, I thought of Calvin, of Daniel, of Sophie, of all the people who left fingerprints on my life. Some bruised, some blessed, all necessary. The past doesn't vanish. It echoes. But sometimes those echoes sound a lot like peace.
The morning light spilled softly across the front porch of my house, the same one they once called too big for one old woman. The jasmine vines had crept higher since spring, curling around the white railing like nature's quiet applause. I stood by the doorway, my coffee cup warm between my palms, and listened to the stillness. Peace had returned, not the fragile kind that trembles after a storm, but the kind earned after standing your ground. Marcus was coming over later, he'd said. Just me this time, Mama. His voice had been gentle on the phone. Tanya wants to talk, but I told her you'd let her when you're ready. I smiled at that. For once, my son was the one protecting the quiet I needed.
Growth takes many forms, and his had come not in defiance, but in understanding. The house felt alive again. Each picture frame, each memory hanging on the wall was no longer shrouded by resentment. The deed papers were tucked safely in my desk drawer, signed and sealed months ago, long before Tanya ever thought she could rewrite my story. I'd always known storms might come. I just made sure to build a roof that could hold. When Marcus arrived, he brought groceries. "You didn't have to do that," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. He smiled, a little sheepish. "Old habits die hard. I figured you could use some help." "I always can," I said softly, "but not the kind you think." He looked at me for a moment, really looked at me. There was no pity in his eyes now, only respect. That, more than any apology, was what I had waited for. We cooked together, laughter blending with the sound of the sizzling pan. It had been years since the kitchen felt this warm. He told me about work, about the new project he was leading, about how Tanya was taking night classes in business management. I listened, nodding quietly. It takes a long time for people to see themselves clearly, I thought. Some learn through loss, others through love. When we finished eating, Marcus hesitated. "She wants to come by, Mama, not to argue, just to say thank you." I took a slow sip of tea, feeling the strength in my silence. "Then let her." The knock came not long after. Tanya stood on the porch, her hair tied back. No designer handbag this time. Just a woman, nervous, human. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in pride. "Margaret," she began softly, "I wanted to apologize for everything." Her voice cracked slightly, the sound of guilt unmasking itself. I didn't rush to comfort her. Some words need to sit heavy before they mean anything. I thought power came from control. But you didn't fight me with anger. You just let the truth speak for itself. I studied her for a moment. "Tanya," I said finally, "power fades. Respect lasts." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I understand that now." I stepped aside, motioning her in. "Then come in, child. We'll start again. With tea." We sat at the same table where so many harsh words had once been spoken. The light from the garden spilled through the window, golden and forgiving. Tanya's gaze wandered to the old photograph on the mantel. Me and my late husband standing in front of this very house the day we bought it. "You built all this?" she said quietly. "We built it, but I kept it standing." There was silence, not uncomfortable, but reverent. Then, almost shyly, she asked, "Would you show me the garden?" Outside, the air smelled of jasmine and earth. The roses had bloomed early this year, vibrant, unapologetic. I knelt to trim a stem, handing it to her. "You know, I used to prune these every morning. My husband said I had too much patience for plants." She smiled faintly. Maybe he didn't realize patience is power too. I laughed softly. No, he knew. He just liked to see me prove it. She laughed too. And in that shared sound, something broke free. The weight of bitterness, of misunderstanding, of pride. When she left that afternoon, the sun was low, painting the porch in amber light. She turned back at the gate, hesitating. "Margaret,
Yes, child. You were right to change the deed. I would have destroyed what you built. But thank you for not destroying me. I felt a warmth spread in my chest. I never wanted to destroy you, Tanya. I just needed you to learn what I already knew. And what's that? That a home isn't a prize. It's a legacy. You don't take it. You earn it. She nodded slowly, then left with the rose still in her hand. Later that evening, Marcus sat with me on the porch as the crickets began their nightly song. "She's trying, Mama," he said. "I know," I replied. "We all are." He looked at me with quiet pride. "You always see everything before it happens, don't you?" I chuckled. "No, son, I just pay attention." We sat in silence after that, the kind that feels full rather than empty. The house stood behind us, mine, not just in papers, but in spirit. I had weathered storms before, but this one had been different. It wasn't just about keeping my roof, it was about keeping my dignity. And I had done both. As the night deepened, a breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of jasmine across the porch. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. My quiet victory. Not loud, not bitter, just steady, unbreakable peace. Because sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is prepare for a battle she hopes will never come and win it anyway.